All right, if you are getting ready for WAEC Physics in 2026, you are in the right place. We're about to go through 10 questions, but these aren't just any questions. These are the patterns that WAEC examiners love to use year in, year out. If you can master these, trust me, you'll have a serious advantage over everyone else. So go ahead, grab a notebook, and let's break these down step by step, just like you would in the real exam. Now, I want you to get this. These aren't just pulled out of thin air. They are patterns. They are the building blocks of the exam, covering core topics WAEC always hits on. So if you get these down, you're not just studying, you're actually getting ahead of the game. Okay, enough talk. Let's jump straight into our very first question, which deals with something foundational, fundamental and derived quantities. Okay, here we go. Question 1. This is such a classic WAEC question. They love, and I mean love, testing if you know the difference between fundamental and derived quantities. So you've got 4 options: area, thrust, pressure, and mass. The task? Figure out which of these are derived. Simple enough, right? Let's get into it. So let's think this through. Area? Well, that's just length times length, right? So it's built from something else. It's derived. What about thrust? That's just a fancy word for force, which is mass times acceleration. Again, derived. Then you have pressure, which is force over area. Definitely derived. The only one left is mass. And mass, well, that's one of the big 7 fundamental quantities. So area, thrust, and pressure, those are our guys. That makes D the correct answer. Now, listen up, because this is the important part, the exam insight. The trick here, the trap WAEC always sets, is with thrust and pressure. So many students forget to break them down. Your secret weapon? Always, always trace a quantity back to its base units. That will never fail you. All right, let's roll into question 2. This one's a classic from kinematics, graph interpretation. You're going to see this a lot. The question is simple. The slope of a straight line displacement time graph, what does it tell us? Okay, whenever you see slope in physics, your brain should immediately think rise over run, or change in the y-axis divided by a change in the x-axis. So here, that's change in displacement over change in time. And what is that? That's the definition of velocity. And since it is straight line, the slope isn't changing, which means the velocity is constant. Boom! The answer is B. Uniform velocity. But here's the exam tip, and it's a big one. So many people trip up and choose speed. Don't do it. Remember, displacement has direction. It's a vector. That means its rate of change, the slope, has to be a vector too, and that's velocity, not speed. Next up, question 3. This is a great one because it's so practical. You can actually picture it. A man wants to exert the greatest pressure on a bench. The question is, how does he do it? Does he lie down, sit, stand? What's the deal? The answer is hiding right inside the formula. Pressure equals force over area. Now, the man's force, his weight, that's not changing, right? So if we want to make the pressure as big as possible, we need to make the area as small as possible. It's an inverse relationship. So think about it. Lying down, huge area. Sitting, smaller but still pretty big. Standing on the toes of just 1 foot, that's a tiny, tiny area, and that's where the pressure is going to be the greatest. Now, for the exam insight, WAEC will test you on this inverse relationship. It's a guarantee. The trap is getting it backwards. Just remember this: to maximize pressure, minimize the area. Always look for the smallest point of contact. Okay. Question 4 takes us into the world of forces. We're talking about equilibrium. The question wants to know, what are the rules? What has to be true for 3 forces that are on the same plane but not parallel to be in perfect balance? Well, for this to happen, there are 2 non-negotiable rules. Rule number 1, the forces have to cancel each other out completely. If you draw them as vectors, head to tail, they have to form a perfect closed triangle, no gaps. Rule number 2, their lines of action must all meet at a single point. They have to be concurrent. Since all the statements given point to these 2 rules, our answer is D. And here's the exam secret. Almost everyone remembers the closed triangle part, but so many forget the concurrent part. You need both for equilibrium. Don't fall into that trap. Alright, let's get our calculators ready for question 8. This is a bread and butter physics problem, conservation of momentum. You've got one ball moving, it hits another one that's just sitting there, and this is the important part. They stick together and move as one. Our job is to figure out how fast they're moving after the collision. Okay, the magic words in this question are move off together. When you see that phrase, a light bulb should go off in your head. That means it's an inelastic collision, and we need to use the formula where the masses combine after impact. So, before the collision, we've got the momentum of the first ball, which is 0.5 times 10, plus the momentum of the second ball, which is 0 because it's at rest. That gives us 5. After the collision, the masses stick together, so we have a total mass of 1 kilogram moving at some new velocity v. So 5 equals 1 times v. It's that simple. The common velocity is 5 meters per second. Now here's the insight you cannot forget. This question is a guaranteed repeater. The only way you can mess this up is by using the wrong formula. As soon as you see move off together or stick together, you know you have to combine the masses on the other side of the equation. Hey, real quick, is this making sense? Are you finding this helpful? If you are, just take a second and hit that like button. It honestly helps a ton, and it tells me you guys want more of this kind of breakdown. Okay, done? Awesome. Let's keep the momentum going. Alright, changing gears a bit for question 6. We're dipping into modern physics now. This one's a straightforward definition question. All it's asking is, what do we mean by the term artificial radioactivity? The big clue here is the word artificial, right? That means it's not natural. It's something we make happen. So artificial radioactivity is just the process of taking a nice, stable nucleus and making it radioactive. And how do we do that? By smashing it with high-energy particles like neutrons. That's the definition you need to have locked in. And for the exam insight, WAEC loves radioactivity. They'll ask for definitions, but they also love, and I mean love, to give you a table to fill out comparing the properties of alpha, beta, and gamma rays. Know that table backwards and forwards. It's free marks. Question 7 is another calculation, and we're sticking with modern physics. This one's all about X-ray tubes. So we've got an electron, and it gets accelerated by a 30 kilovolt source. The question is, how much kinetic energy does it gain? Now, this might look intimidating, but it boils down to one super simple formula. Kinetic energy equals E times V. E is just the charge of an electron, and V is the voltage. But wait, here's the trap. The voltage is 30 kilovolts. You absolutely have to convert that to regular volts. So that's 30 times 10 to the power of 3. Once you've done that, you just plug in the numbers, multiply, and you get your answer. 4.8 times 10 to the minus 15 joules. And the exam insight here is absolutely crucial. That kilo prefix, forgetting to convert from kilovolts to V, is the #1 reason people get this wrong. Always check your unit and convert to the base SI unit. Okay, take a deep breath because question 8 is a big one. This is the kind of multi-part question that can really separate students. It's on the photoelectric effect. And yeah, it involves plotting a graph. You get a table of data, and from your graph, you have to pull out 3 very important values. Listen, on a question like this, your graph is your entire answer. You've got to plot kinetic energy on the vertical y-axis and the frequency on the horizontal x-axis. You should get a nice straight line. And once you have that line, it tells you everything. The gradient or the slope of that line, that's Planck's constant, h. Where the line hits the x-axis, that's your threshold frequency. And if you trace it back to where it hits the negative y-axis, that's your work function. Now, for the insight. This photoelectric effect graph is a WAEC favorite. It shows up all the time. The easiest ways to lose marks are picking a bad scale for your axes or not reading the intercepts carefully. Practice this one until you can do it in your sleep. It's worth a lot of points. Okay, moving on to question 9. We're dipping into electrostatics here. The problem is pretty specific. Calculate the force, the electrostatic force, between the proton and the electron in a hydrogen atom. They even give you the distance separating them. This one's a straight-up plug and play with Coulomb's law. You know the one. Force equals K times the 2 charges divided by the distance squared. So K is your constant, and the charges are just the charge of a proton and electron, which have the same magnitude. But here is the most important part of the entire calculation. Do not, I repeat, do not forget to square the distance r on the button. It's r squared. Once you plug everything in and you're careful with your calculator, you'll get 8.52 times 10 to the minus 8 newtons. And that brings me to the exam insight. That little squared on the r, it's the number one mistake. So many people forget it. When you do this question, say it out loud. R squared. Burn it into your brain. Our final question, number 10. We are finishing up with circuits, specifically a potential divider. Now, this is a double WAEC question. Part 1 is a proof. You have to actually derive the formula. Part 2 is a calculation, where you use that formula to find the value of the second resistor, R2. So, like I said, 2 parts. First, you got to show where the potential divider formula comes from, starting with Ohm's law. Then, for the math part, they tell us the ratio of the input voltage to the output voltage is 2.5. You just pop that into the formula, plug in 30 for R1, and then it's just a bit of algebra to solve for R2. You rearrange it, and you will find that R2 is 20 ohms. And for our very last exam insight, potential dividers show up almost every year. But the trap isn't the math, it's the proof. So many students just memorize the final formula and skip the derivation. Those are easy marks you're throwing away. You have to know how to build this formula from first principles. And that's a wrap on our 10 questions. So let's do a quick recap. Think of this as your exam toolkit. We've gone over some must-know formulas for momentum, energy, and forces. But honestly, more important than the formulas are the patterns we've seen. Things like knowing the difference between fundamental and derived quantities, being a pro at interpreting graphs, and having your modern physics definitions down cold. If you can truly understand these core ideas, you're not just ready for the exam, you're in a fantastic position to ace it. Look, if you can confidently handle these 10 question types, you are genuinely ahead of the curve. You've basically just drilled some of the most high-frequency topics in the entire WAEC Physics syllabus. If this helped you out, do a friend a favor and share it with them. Like this explainer, and of course, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And hey, for even more of these sure banker questions, you've got to check out examkp.com. Keep putting in the work. You've got this.